Thank you. Let's go! That's what all the young kids are screaming nowadays for just about any reason, so well, I'm just going to say that. So maybe try that at your next staff meeting. I have a chapter in my book, and that chapter is called What the If? And that particular chapter, what I talk about is, I talk about how I believe it's pointless, it doesn't serve a purpose to sit around talking about what if. What if this? What if that? But today, after hearing Josh and after learning a little bit more and watching that video, I'm going to make a few exceptions to my own writing. What if? I was raised by my big one. She was born in 1920, so she was what we call old school. She didn't take no mess, right? She believed also, though, that you led by example. And if she were here today, she probably would be sitting right next to Lisa. And as soon as I mentioned her name, she probably would perk up and lean over to Lisa and say, "Hey, that's my grandbaby." Now the problem is my grandma, my big mama didn't whisper too well, so everybody in here probably would have heard her. But I went to live with her when I was 9. And like I mentioned, I spent a number of years in the foster care system. She fought the state of California, and she gained full custody of me. So my grandma, my big mom, was my first hero. Now, as I started to get older, I believe Big Mom, she recognized a few things. She realized a few things. And what she realized is there are some things that she couldn't teach me. There are some things that she would need some help with. For instance, she didn't know anything about sports. I love sports, football, basketball, soccer. She didn't know where to take me to sign up for sports. She didn't know anything about sports. I realized that probably as I got older, she understood that maybe, like the young man in the video, she understood that maybe little Ian might become interested in girls. And the last person that he probably would want advice from would be his big mom. My big mom she never went to the prom. So she would not have been able to help me with my promposal. You gotta see, you gotta go big or you gotta go home. So what did she do? She understood that I needed some help and that she needed some help. So she made the decision to make sure that she surrounded me with good examples, with leaders, with successful people. Where did she find these people? She found them in church. That's where we spent. We were there 3 days a week. But there was one problem. Now the men that she connected us with in church, they were successful, they were good leaders, and they led by example. But the only issue is they were my big mom's age. So they were like 60 years older than I was. Now my son is sitting right there. He has a name for just about anybody if you're 5 years older than he is, he has a name for it. He calls you an old head. Now, I am an old head, and I wear that title with pride because as an old head, there's just certain things that I refuse to do. Like, I won't ride a skateboard. As an old head, if you ride in my car, there's certain types of music that I'm not going to listen to. You're going to have to listen to jazz, blues, or talk radio. As an old head, there's certain types of clothing that I refuse to wear. Like, a few years ago, my son had on some pants that were so tight, I could tell you how much change he had in his pocket. My daughter said to me, they said, "Dad, you need to update your clothing. You need to get some skinny pants." I said, "I'm not wearing no skinny pants." But I'll tell you this, the old heads that were in our church, they had a little bit of swagger. They weren't, they were kind of cool. They walked like this here. And anytime I got in trouble in school, or if I had issues or disagreements with my big mom, she would make me sit down with one of these old heads after church. typically it would go something like this. Sit down, right chair. Now that didn't mean sit down in the right chair. That meant sit down right there. And then they would start the lecture. And oftentimes the lecture would go the same way every single time. They would say, sit down right there. Now if any of you can finish any of these sentences, please help me out. Maybe you've heard this lecture before. But they would say, sit down right there. And then they would say, you know, your big mama been telling me that all the conversations that she had with you, things seem to go in one ear and out the other. And then they would say something like, young man, you must not know how good you have it. And then they turn up the heat on it. And this is how they turn up the heat in a lecture. They would say, young man, back in my I used to have to walk to school through the snow. Now the real, what we call the real triple OG old heads, they would add a distance to how far they had to walk. They said, young man, I had to walk 85 miles just to get to school. And heaven forbid if they got distracted or they forgot what they were saying, because they would start the whole lecture all over again. But for some reason, the distance that they had to walk would always change. So they say, young man, I had to walk 85 miles just to get to school. I'm in here with a youngster. That's right. I had to walk 120 miles just to get to school. And that was one direction. And it was uphill both ways. And I didn't have any shoes. You know, as a kid, you're sitting there listening to these stories and you're feeling real bad about whatever it was that you did. Now, I don't know if anyone here wears those Crocs. If you don't, you're probably old head, right? I don't wear Crocs, but I'm glad we didn't have Crocs when I was a kid, because the old head probably would have used that against me. For instance, he might have said, what kind of shoes you got on there, youngster? Crocs? You see, back in my day, we didn't have Crocs. All we had was socks. And I had to share mine with my little brother. But what if I had a bid? I can tell you that probably if I had a bid, you'd probably have a different speaker here today. What if I had a bid, especially the year that I turned 19 years old? That's the year that I made one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life, and I was in trouble. I was standing in front of a judge, handcuffed. I had a belly band around my waist, and my feet were shackled together at the ankles. I stood there in front of this judge, and he looks at me. He says, the state of California finds you guilty of armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and sentences you to 15 years, Department of Corrections. A little bit later that day, when the cell doors closed behind me for the first time as a convicted felon, I stood in the middle of this empty cell, and my knees started to shake uncontrollably. I just collapsed, and I fell to the floor, and I cried alone. And I can remember laying there on that floor. I can remember hearing voices in my head. I heard the voice of my foster mom saying, you're stupid and you ain't gonna never amount to nothing. When I was 3 years old, I went into the foster care system. And one of my foster parents, her name was Miss Alexander. This woman would lock me inside of a closet with no light. She'd open that door and she would hit me or kick me with whatever she had, whatever she could get her hands on. And then she would close and lock the closet door behind her. I have scars on my body that you can't see. I have a 3rd-degree burn right here on my hand that she put there with an iron. But the worst thing that she would do is she would open that door and she would just stand over me and she would say, "You're stupid and you ain't gonna never amount to nothing." That's the voice that I heard laying on that prison floor. I heard the voice of family members that would say loud enough for me to hear, "That boy's gonna be just like his daddy." My father was a career criminal and he died in prison. But what if? What if I had a big? What if the voice that I heard wasn't the voice of my foster mom, but was the voice of my big instead, saying to me, "Young man, prison doesn't have to be your life. You can get out of here and you can do great things. Young man, you are only 19 years old. You've got your whole life ahead of you." What if the voice that I heard was not the voice of my family members, but instead was the voice of my big, saying something like, "You're nothing like your father. And you've made a mistake, but you can turn things around." To me, that's the power of a big. That's the power of a mentor. When I was 17 years old, I was in the 10th grade and I had 2 A's. Now some of you might be thinking, "Well, what do you do?" But I wasn't the best student. Now I didn't say I was stupid. I didn't say I couldn't learn. I said I struggled as a student. I had a lot of things going on in my life, but that year I had 2 A's. So all of a sudden, after a conversation with one of my friends, I said, "You know what? I'm going to college." So I talked to my friend and I realized I needed to ask my teacher to sign a recommendation to place me into AP history. It was called college prep history. So after class one afternoon, I walked up to my history teacher. My little chest was all puffed up. I was excited. My heart was beating out my chest. But I said, "Mrs. Ski," I said, "I was wondering if you would sign this recommendation for me to be placed in college prep history." Silence. Finally, Mrs. Ski broke that silence by saying, "You know what, young man?" She says, "I believe college prep history would be too difficult for you." And the next thing she said to me, she said it like she was doing me a favor. She said, "You know, not everybody's cut out for college." Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, why don't you just sign the paper? Maybe I won't get an A in college prep history, but I'm a pass. I didn't say that to her. I just walked out of her classroom and I never gave college prep classes anything, another thought after that. But what if? What if I had a big? And I called that big once I got home and maybe I said, "Hey, guess what Mrs. Key said?" Now, depending on my big, I could have gone a couple different ways. One of my bigs, maybe they would have said, "Hey, I'm going up to that school tomorrow." But maybe one of my bigs, maybe they would have simply said, "Young man, the strongest voice that you hear every single day is not going to be the voice of Mrs. Ski. The strongest voice and the most important thing that you hear every single day is not going to be somebody else's voice, but it's going to be the things that you say to yourself. And I need you to repeat after me. I can do anything I want that I want to do. I'm smart enough to go to college. I'm smart enough to do anything that I set my mind to." To me, that's the power of a big. That's the power of a mentor. I can remember when I was 13 years old. Full transparency, I would steal money out of my big mom's purse. She called it a pocketbook. But I would take $1 out of my big mom's purse and I would walk to the store and I would buy candy. Now my son, he might be sitting over there thinking, "You can't buy nothing with no dollars." But that's not true, because back in our day, yeah, you could. Candy only cost 10 cents.
Okay.
So I would go to the store and I would buy 10 packs of candy. And then I would take that candy and then I would sell it on the bus for 25 cents. So I would get on the bus and I would start making sales. I got the Nallators, I got the lemon heads, I got the Boston baked beans, I got the Chico sticks. Some of y'all don't know nothing about that, huh?
We do.
I got the Boston baked beans. If I didn't sell out on the school bus, I'd hit the classroom. Got the Nallators. But then I had to shut down business because I I got caught and got suspended. Now, I don't think I have to tell some of you guys what Big Mama said. But what if? What if I had a bid and they could have set me down and taught me how to set up a business the right way? But if they had set me down and taught me what an LLC was or a 501(c)(3), to me, that's the power of a bid. That's the power of a mentor. When I was 11 years old, I loved to read. And we didn't have a lot of books in our house. And after reading all the books that we did have, I went and borrowed a book from my sister. The author of that book, her name was Judy Blume. And the book was called, Are You There, God? It's Me, Mark. It was a coming of age story about a young girl becoming a woman. Now let me tell you something. I learned some things in that book that at 11 years old I did not want to know. Like, I'm reading that book and I'm thinking to myself, if my sister got to go through all of this, what do I got to go through? Now, the fellas, we got a little lucky. We don't have to go through none of that stuff, right? But I finished that book and I put it right back where I found it, and I never touched any more of my sister's books. But what I did do is I took my backpack and I went to the library. I walked through that library and I grabbed a few books and I put them in my backpack. And I walked out of the library. Now you might be thinking, why would you steal books from a library? I didn't know how to get a library card. But what if I had a bid? And maybe every other month, my bid took me to the library to take back the old books and check out some new ones. Like, what if I had a bid and the library became our man cave for nerds? Right? What if I had a bid and they showed me the section of books, the coming of age stories for young men young boys becoming a man? Are you there, God? It's not Margaret, it's me. You little in now. I'm going to become a man. That's the power of a bid. That's the power of a mentor. Ages 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4, that's when I was in the foster home. Why was I in the foster care system? When I was 3 years old, I got into my mom's purse and I found a bottle of prescription medication. Now you guys know today, if you have a bottle of prescription medication, or even if it's a bottle of the gummy vitamins, it has a child lock on it. You gotta know 4 languages and karate to get it open, right? But in 1975, you could open it like Tic Tacs. So at 3 years old, I found this medication, I opened it, and I swallowed everything in the bottle. When they found me, they rushed me to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, my heart stopped multiple times, and eventually I went into a coma. CPS got involved, did an investigation, declared my mom an unfit parent. I was removed from her home, made a ward of the state, and boom, I was in the foster care system. Now, why was my mom on prescription medication? When she was 7 months pregnant with me, she was walking up a flight of stairs. She didn't know this at the time, but someone that she had a disagreement with earlier, a woman, was standing above her, holding a pot of boiling water. As my mom made her way up those stairs, that woman poured that water onto my mom, causing her to fall down the stairs and go into premature labor. So that's how I came into this world, under violent circumstances, traumatic circumstances. Now Now, during all of these things that happened in my life, maybe you're wondering, well, where was your father? I mentioned it earlier, my father, he was a career criminal. He died in prison. So I spent a lot of years where I thought I hated my father. I blamed him for everything that I had to go through. I felt like he should have been there for my mom when that accident happened. I felt that he should have been there for me after I took that medication. Maybe instead of going into the foster care system, I would have just stayed there with my father. But I've learned to forgive him. And today I know that I didn't really know, to this day, I don't know a lot about him. I don't know what his childhood was like. I don't know what he went through as a young man. But what if? What if my father would have had a big? If my father would have had a big, I would definitely believe you would probably have a different speaker here today. If my father would have had a big, maybe the first time he went to prison, somebody would have sat him down and said, young man, prison doesn't have to be your life. And you can get out of here and you can do great things. If my father would have had a big, maybe he would have had someone to teach him how to be a better man, a better husband, and a better father. What if? Now you guys see why I don't like to what if. Because I can't change any of those things. But as I get ready to close, I'm going to make one last exception to my own writings in my book. What if? What if when everyone in this room leaves here tonight, you make the decision to talk about this organization to 5, 10, 15, 20 people. Maybe you're tweeting, you're Instagramming, or if you're my son, you make a dance and TikToking. I'm an old head, I don't TikTok. But what if? What if today everyone in this room makes the decision to commit or recommit to making a difference? What if everyone in this room today makes the decision to commit or recommit to making an impact? What if everyone in this room today made the choice, made the decision to contribute in some way, shape, form, or fashion? Just imagine what that could possibly do to more kids like Reed. Of course, now I'm going to invite the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Colorado, Miss Elise.